Welcome to the Embodied Empath Podcast, the space where sensitive, intuitive women learn to regulate their nervous system, heal anxiety, and live with grounded confidence. I'm your host, Valerie Lundgren. Let's begin. So, have you ever thought, I'm doing really well, and then suddenly you're not? And maybe you've been working on yourself, or you've been regulating your nervous system. You've been setting boundaries like a badass. You've been going to therapy and doing the somatic work. You're meditating. You're healing that inner child. Maybe you've even had weeks or months where you thought, wow, I'm really getting better. And then something happens. Your anxiety comes back. You have a panic attack. You get triggered by something you thought you'd had already healed from, and you fall back into the people pleasing. You find yourself overthinking again and you shut down. You might snap at someone. Or maybe you wake up one morning and you just feel heavy. And suddenly there's this thought, oh my God, I'm going backwards. All that work I did and I'm right back where I started. If you've ever felt like this, I want you to stay with me today because I want to talk to you about the most frustrating and misunderstood parts of healing. The moments when healing doesn't feel like healing at all. Welcome back to the Embodied Empath Podcast. I'm Valerie, and today we're talking about what happens when you feel like your healing is going backwards. And I want to start by telling you this. Healing is not linear. I know we hear the phrase all the time. But what does it actually mean? Because when you're the one sitting in the middle of anxiety, when you're the one crying, when you're the one whose body suddenly feels like it's back in survival mode, hearing someone say healing isn't linear doesn't always help. So today I want to explain what's actually happening. So one of the biggest misconceptions about healing is that once we've healed something, it should never affect us again. So we think, I worked through that. I thought I released this. I thought I was over this. But your nervous system doesn't work like a deleting file from a computer. It just doesn't delete things. Your brain and body learn through experience. And when something happens repeatedly or carries a strong emotional charge, your brain builds pathways around the experience. Your nervous system then learns when this happens, this is how we respond. So maybe your body learned that conflict means danger, or being alone means abandonment. Someone being upset means you need to fix it. The physical sensations mean there's a panic attack coming, and rest means you're being too lazy. Maybe saying no to someone means someone might reject you. Those patterns can become deeply familiar. Healing doesn't mean the old pathway disappears overnight. Healing means you're building another pathway, another option, another response. So I like to think of it like going on a path through the woods. Imagine you've walked the same path every day for 30 years. The path is clear, it's easy to follow. You don't have to think about where you're going. That's a survival pattern, right? You know, it's just common. You know where you're going. Then one day you decide, I'm going to go a different way. So you start creating a new path. And at first it's difficult. There are branches, there's tall grass, there's some thorns, and you have to pay attention. But every time you walk the new path, it becomes more clear. That is nervous system healing. You're creating new ways of responding. But here's the important part. The old path is still there. And when you're tired or stressed out, hormonal, maybe overwhelmed or grieving, or experiencing something that feels familiar in an old wound, your nervous system may automatically take the old path just because it's easier, because it knows the way. So that doesn't mean the new path disappeared. It just means your system went back to what was familiar during a moment when your capacity was lower. And that's very different from losing all your progress. So this connects to something called neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity is the brain's ability to change and adapt through experience. Your brain is not fixed. Throughout your life, neural connections can strengthen, weaken, and reorganize based on what you repeatedly experience and practice. So that's incredible news for healing, because it means your patterns are not necessarily your destiny. But neuroplasticity also requires repetition. So one meditation doesn't undo 30 years of hypervigilance, and one boundary doesn't undo decades of people-pleasing. One somatic exercise, it does not suddenly make every trigger disappear. It's repetition. It's having the trigger and then responding differently, again and again and again. Sometimes successfully, and sometimes not. And each time you return to yourself, you're strengthening the new pathway. This is really important. Your capacity changes. Your nervous system doesn't operate at exactly the same level every day. So think about how different you feel after a really good night's sleep versus 3 nights of terrible sleep. Or when you're well nourished versus when you haven't eaten enough. Or maybe when life is just calm versus when 5 people need something from you. Your nervous system has capacity. And when the capacity is stretched, the old patterns can surface more easily. This is why you might notice more anxiety when you're exhausted or overstimulated or sick, or going through grief, under financial pressure or in a relationship conflict, or maybe experiencing hormonal changes. And for women in perimenopause, this is especially important. Hormonal fluctuations can affect sleep, mood, and stress sensitivity. So you may find that anxiety and emotional reactivity you thought you had healed suddenly feels louder. That doesn't mean you failed. It just may mean your nervous system has less capacity in the moment. Now let's add in the empath piece, right? So if you're someone who is highly sensitive to other people's emotions, your nervous system may already be processing a lot. You're already noticing the mood in the room, the tension in someone's voice, or the person who's upset, the person who needs something, or the energy that just feels off. And you're already tired or stressed. Your ability to differentiate between this is mine and this belongs to someone else can become harder. And suddenly you're overwhelmed and you think, gosh, I thought I had better boundaries. You do, but boundaries require the capacity too. So healing isn't about never absorbing energy again. It's about noticing sooner and returning to yourself faster. That's the progress. So what progress might actually look like? This is where I want you to change how you measure healing. Maybe before, a trigger took you out for a week. Now it takes a day. That's healing. Maybe before you didn't realize you were people pleasing, and now you notice yourself doing it. That's healing. Maybe before you believed every anxious thought. Now there's a tiny part of you that says, wait, is that actually true? That's healing. And maybe before you abandoned yourself to keep someone else happy. And now you feel guilty when you set that boundary. But you still see it. And you still set it. And that's healing. Maybe you have a panic attack. But now you know what to do when a panic attack comes. And that's healing. Healing isn't measured only by whether a reaction happens. Sometimes healing is measured by what happens next. So there's a part of healing that can be confusing. Sometimes when we become more connected to our bodies, we actually notice more and people think I'm getting worse. But before, you may have been numb or disconnected, maybe really busy or distracted, and you didn't notice how exhausted you were. You didn't notice the tension in your body. Maybe you didn't notice that resentment or what your needs were, but now you do. And awareness can initially feel like things are getting worse, but awareness is what gives you choice. You can't change a pattern you can't see. And this also connects beautifully with our last episode about inner child healing. Sometimes an old wound resurfaces because a younger part of you finally feels safe enough to be seen. So maybe something happens today and suddenly you feel 8 years old again. You feel rejected or left out or unimportant. And instead of saying, why am I still dealing with this? Try asking, what part of me needs me right now? That's a completely different relationship with healing. You're no longer fighting the trigger. You're listening to what it's trying to reveal. So we're going to do our somatic practice. This is the shake and reset. Please do these somatic practices when you are in a safe place where you can be comfortable and have a moment to do them. Don't do these while driving. So I want to give you a practice today for those moments when you feel frustrated, stuck, or like you're going backwards. And if you're able to, go ahead and stand up. And if standing isn't comfortable, you can do this seated. Just start by gently shaking your hands, letting them move. And now let the shaking travel into your arms and your shoulders. Give it a little shake and notice, is it a small, soft shake or does a bigger, exaggerated shake feel better? Just notice what feels good. You can, if you're standing, you can bounce your knees, or if you're sitting, you can kind of bounce your legs. This is not forcing, it's just movement. Just feel it. And then as you're doing so, just start imagining that you're shaking off the frustration, the pressure. You're shaking off the expectation that you should be further along. And let your body move for a few moments. And just breathe. And slowly let the movement get a little smaller. And a little smaller. Until you come back to stillness. Placing one hand over your heart and one over your belly, and take a breath and say to yourself, I am not back at the beginning. Take a breath. My body is having a moment. Take a breath. I know more now than I knew then. Take a breath. I can meet myself here. Just notice. You're not trying to force the anxiety away. You're reminding yourself that this version of you has the tools the old version didn't. You're not starting over. Good. I also want to normalize something. Not everything has to be a healing lesson. Sometimes you're just tired. Sometimes you're just hormonal. Sometimes someone just annoys you. Sometimes life just sucks. And sometimes we're just going to have a bad day. And I think the healing world can sometimes put pressure on us to analyze everything. What wound is this? What trauma is coming up? What is the universe trying to teach me now? Maybe it's nothing. Maybe you just need dinner and 8 hours of sleep. So just know that healing means knowing when to go deep and knowing when to simply just take care of yourself. The real sign of healing isn't that you never struggle again. It's that when you do struggle, you don't abandon yourself. We're not shaming ourselves anymore. And you didn't decide that you failed. You become curious instead. You give yourself what you need. You use the tools that you've learned and you ask for support. And eventually, you come back. That's resilience. That's regulation. And that, my friends, is healing. So if you're in one of those seasons right now where the anxiety feels a little louder and where old patterns are showing up, maybe you're wondering if all the work you've done even mattered, I want you to remember this. You're not back at the beginning. You're meeting an old pattern with a new version of yourself, a version with more awareness, more tools, more compassion, more capacity. And maybe you took the old path today, and that's okay. A new one is there tomorrow, and you can choose it again. So if this episode resonated with you, go ahead and share it with someone who needs to hear that healing isn't about getting it right every single day. Subscribe to the Embodied Empath Podcast so you can continue this journey with me. And if you're ready for deeper support with anxiety, nervous system regulation, somatic healing, and reconnecting with yourself, you can explore my work and ways to connect with me at valerielundgren.co. Until next time, be gentle with the version of you who's having a hard day. She's not undoing your healing. She's part of it. I'll see you next week. This episode supported you. Share it with another empath who needs it. And if you're ready for deeper work, somatic coaching, nervous system healing, or my Embodied Reset program, just visit mindfulwellness.me. Your healing is not a solo journey. See you next week.